call this meeting to order. Staff, will you conduct a roll call to establish we have a quorum present?
Yes. Vice Chairman Jones.
Present.
Commissioner Parker.
Present.
Chairwoman Devers.
Present.
Commissioner Smith.
Present.
Commissioner Echols.
Present.
We have a quorum. Thank you.
Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Staff has an update for us. Ms. Brookins?
Yes, from the proposed agenda that was published online, we're making a distinction. We're separating the application. The data center on Bohannon Road's request for the comprehensive plan amendment is going first, followed by the data center Bohannon Road rezoning and use permit. So we're making those two distinct items.
Thank you. Commissioners, I will now entertain a motion to approve the meeting agenda with the changes recommended by staff for this evening.
Commissioner Echols, I make a motion that the agenda for tonight's meeting be approved with the correction update from staff.
Commissioner Smith, second.
I now have a motion and a second, so I will call the vote. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those in opposition, signify by saying nay. The motion carries. Commissioners, I trust that you have reviewed the meeting minutes. If there are no questions or discussions, I will now entertain a motion to approve the regular minutes.
Commissioner Parker make a motion to approve the meeting November the 5th, 2024.
Commissioner Echols, second.
I now have a motion and a second, so I will call the vote. All those in favor of the motion as stated, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those in opposition, please signify by saying nay. The motion carries. I will now open the period for public comments. Please reserve your comments related to a specific agenda item when I call for comments on that item. Comments to the Planning and Zoning Commission should be limited to no more than 2 minutes. Groups wishing to address an issue should select 1 or 2 spokespersons. The time allowed for all issues should not exceed a total of 15 minutes. Issues raised at this time are generally referred to the Director of Planning and Zoning for review. Responses will be provided at a later date. We have one item under old business. Staff, I will now ask you to provide an update.
Good evening, Commissioners in the City of Fairburn.
Good evening.
Good evening.
So today we will be reviewing a request for a rezoning from the zoning district C2, which is general commercial, to PD, which is planned development. So the address of the parcel is 5650 Milam Road. The applicant is Stephen Jones. That's what the site looks like today. It is currently undeveloped forest land. And we included a survey for your review. So the intent of the applicant is to rezone 14.22 acres from C2, which is general commercial, to PD, which is planned development. The applicant is proposing to convert the undeveloped vacant land into a mixed-use development with 5,699 square feet of ground-level retail fronting on Renaissance Parkway, 252 multifamily dwelling units, and a conservation open space area that preserves, among other things, an existing and established pond on the property, with a concurrent variance to reduce the number of parking spaces from 2 spaces per residential unit to 1.5 spaces per residential unit. I have included the existing zoning map as well as the future land use map for your review. And this is the concept plan, the latest revision that they have submitted. In the next few slides, it's just simply some elevations of what the property would look like. This is an aerial of the property. As you can see, the pond in the top right corner. The applicant had held 2 public participation meetings, one on August 18th and another on the 12th of this year, 2024. There was a total of 3 attendees in both meetings collectively. So there are some considerations that I will go over when we discuss this item at a later date, but I will simply just go through the slides for your review. And the applicant also has a concurrent variance that they have filed along with the rezoning request. And so the development is proposed to have 407 parking spaces. The applicant has stated this is due to the fact that the multifamily units are geared towards young professionals who only own 1 vehicle. It is also worth noting that several other nearby and similar developments were granted variances for this provision as well. I have included some mathematical calculations for your review. I will not go over them, but they are there. And so, as well as with the variance, there are some considerations to take into, and so I'll just simply scroll through those slides as well. And so staff recommendation is to table this request to allow for additional community engagement and for staff to review and assist in refining this request. I conclude. Thank you.
Thank you, Jansen. If there are no additional questions or discussions, may I have a motion to table the item?
Commissioner Echols, make a motion to table the item
Excuse me.
of the
Sorry.
minutes.
I believe the applicant wants to at least make a presentation to the commission this
Absolutely.
evening. before it's-
Come forward.
Okay.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, Commissioners, thank you for the opportunity to appear before you. My name is Stephen Jones with the law firm of Taylor English Duma. I represent the applicant and the property owner, KBD Fairburn. I have a few slides to show you today. Because staff's recommendation is to table, I'm going to take Mr. Chancellor's lead. It'd be a little more brief than I normally would, but I do appreciate the opportunity to appear before you and to give you an overview of the project you'll likely hear at a later date. KBD Fairburn has owned this property since 2005. When they purchased the property, they purchased it contingent for it to be rezoned. That was 2005. The entire area was going to be developed for more strip commercial areas. Well, we all know what happened next, 2008. Since then, the property's laid fallow and has not had an economic use as it sits. There's not been a viable purchaser for it. General commercial just doesn't work on this back site, and we'll get into that more as we delve deeper into this site. But what you have seen and what we'll talk about in the slides is after that, after the Great Recession, we've seen a trend, an effectuation of the city's comprehensive plan and future land use map for developments comparable to this. At your last meeting and the meeting prior to that, you've seen mixed-use developments similar to this one. What this does is this continues that progress and that trend forward on what really is the last parcel to effectuate that trend between the county line and Highway 85. So here's the subject site. It is on Milam Road at 74, behind 74 to the east, just south of Interstate 85. Here's your existing zoning map. You'll see the proliferation of PD zoning districts as you come down 74, situated behind highway commercial zoned and developed properties. If you've been likely down or up 74 recently in this section, you've seen that development trend. And you can see that here in the comprehensive plan that was planned for, where you have these highway commercial uses fronting 74, restaurants, car wash, general retail. Behind that, and sometimes in line with it, there's been a development trend for mixed-use multifamily, which then steps down as you go further out from 74 to attached single-family and detached single-family. And you can see that trend up and down 74. I've shown that on this next slide here, where you'll see the subject property highlighted in yellow, and the red circles are either pure multifamily developments, or, which is the case for the two right red circles and the two left red circles closest to our property, mixed-use multifamily developments. And you'll see that that development trend has continued all the way down. Those two leftmost circles closest to the yellow square are the mixed-use multifamily developments that this board recently considered and that the council, I believe, considered at its last meeting. So that brings me now to the specifics of this proposal. I've got the site plan later in this slide deck, but I think a 3D picture tells a lot better story than a 2D site plan. And what you have here is mixed-use multifamily similar to those other developments, but ours is unique in that our conservation area utilizes an existing farm pond on this property and preserves it in conservation. When KBD bought this property in 2005, this entire property was pasture land. And that farm pond was out there and used for part of the pasture. It's existed since KBD's owned it. If you've been by or you saw Chancellor's pictures, there has been a forest that's grown up around it in the 19 years since KBD's owned it. But we're preserving as an active or a passive amenity for the residents of this development, that pond. And you'll see, and you saw in some of the renderings that Chancellor showed, there's a dock and a walking trail around it, really to highlight the history of the parcel and preserve some of that open space. So there's the 2D rendering. Again, it doesn't do really the same justice that the rendering does, but it helps highlight that, as you'll see in the top left-hand corner, which is the northwesternmost corner, we have that commercial component. And that's consistent with the commercial component which you see up and down Renaissance Parkway. Later on your agenda, you actually have a request for dedication of a portion, the remaining portion of Renaissance Parkway north of this site. So in this parcel, in conjunction with those other mixed-use multifamily developments that are north of this on Renaissance, along with Renaissance Parkway, will activate all of Renaissance for a true mixed-use, walkable development where the residents of this development, the Oslo, the Dillon, and others within walking distance can walk Renaissance Parkway and utilize all of the tenant spaces, the restaurant spaces, the boutique spaces, the various types of uses that will use those commercial components of these multifamily mixed-use developments. And as well as that, remind you that there is also to the northwest of this, just past the power line, a park and ride. And so if you look at our mixture of units, we're primarily geared towards 1 and 2 bedroom with just a few 3 bedroom, because we're targeting those active young professionals that want to utilize the park and ride. And in conjunction with the completion of Renaissance Parkway, they'll be able to access that too in that walkable mixed-use district fashion. So we think that that's a really cool feature that is, like I said, going to activate the park and ride. This is at the intersection of Renaissance Parkway and Milam Road. It's just another rendering to give you a feel for how we've continued the development trend, the building style that you see with the other mixed-use multifamilies that are further north on Renaissance Parkway. We're trying to continue that entire district, that entire corridor throughout Renaissance. Moving north on Renaissance, this is the first entrance. This is an emergency-only entrance. That's for fire, EMS, police. Moving a little further north, this is our resort-style amenity with a clubhouse, pool, typical things that you'd see. This is then looking directly to the main entrance. I think this is a really wonderful rendering that shows you the view that a residents will see, that real prominent 2x2 building or set of units that you see when you come in. Then further moving north, this is the commercial component. Facing Renaissance, really like those other mixed-use multifamilies that you see further north on Renaissance Parkway, where folks can actively walk up to it from either this development or other developments. Of course, we've got commercial parking, but this really fronts it on Renaissance, where you, again, it can be utilized by pedestrians. Back to the conservation of that farm pond. This isn't a stormwater pond. This is an actual farm pond that exists on the property today that we're conserving, going to put a walking trail around. You can see this is from the northeastmost corner looking into the property, and you can see that dock feature and really how many of the units, a vast majority of the units that actually overlook, or the vast majority of the buildings actually overlook this pond, which we think is a really wonderful feature. I'll end on that. I know I promised to be brief. Wasn't as brief as I tried to be, but we'll have some more to share with you. We'll just thank you for your consideration of this project. We hope you agree with our analysis of the development trend, the comp plan, the historical zonings in the area, as well as the continuation of the building trend down Renaissance Parkway. If you have any questions at this time, I'd be happy to take them. Otherwise, thank you and have a wonderful night.
Do you have any questions for the applicant? At this time.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay, so if there are no additional questions or responses or discussion, may I have a motion to table this item?
Commissioner Echols makes a motion to table the KBD rezoning and concurrent variances with remarks from staff and the constituent. Thank you.
Commissioner Parker, second.
I now have a motion and a second, so I will call the vote. All those in favor of the motion as stated, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those in opposition, please signify by saying nay. Okay, motion carries. We will now move into the new business portion of the agenda. Our first item of new business is as follows. Item 1, Data Center, Bohannon Road, Comprehensive Plan Land Use Amendment Requests. The applicant requests approval to request to change the Comprehensive Plan Land Use, CLIP, CLUP, designations from rural residential and green space to office industrial. Staff, I will now ask you to present the staff analysis and recommendations.
Greetings. If you recall, a few meetings ago, we adopted the text amendment to allow for applicants to have future land use amendments. This is a request to amend the future land use map designation. The first item is the land use designation. There are a number of lots involved with this request. The applicant is, as shown on the map, requesting to change all of the properties that are identified in red from the current land use designation until office and industrial. The applicant has provided a site plan so that we can review all of those items. This is the first time we are considering a comprehensive plan land use amendment. Just as a friendly reminder, there are a number of standards associated with it. A comprehensive plan amendment is a significant change to the land use patterns within an area. This is really the vision, and we have lots of goals that are listed in the comprehensive plan, and those are all a part of the review process. The first item we look at is changes in the economy, land use development opportunities of the area that have occurred. Because of the size of this development, they had to go through a development of regional impact study with the Atlanta Regional Commission. We had GDOT looking at it, so there are a number of other state agencies that looked at this project before staff provided any recommendations. So a lot of those items are were helpful in the analysis of this request. The second area is the extent to which there is additional land area that is needed for the specific type of use. Fairburn has quite a few industrial developments, both in the city limits and in our region, that are available for proposed use, but because of the amount of power and water consumption, this does limit the development options, because there are quite a few system upgrades that have to happen for a data center to be able to locate area. And so the other item is, how does the request align with concerns, goals, and policies in the comprehensive plan? Our comprehensive plan had a significant focus on our downtown area, looking at things like preserving areas, increasing activity in the downtown area, looking at preserving as much of our rural area as possible. And it also had some recommendations regarding updates to zoning ordinances and things of that nature. The comprehensive plan, in terms of just the land use goals, does not align with this request. But there is a section that says Fairburn in the future would have attributes like having a diverse growing population, having large businesses that offer jobs. Data centers do typically offer jobs, not nearly as much as a traditional warehouse, but the jobs are usually pretty high paying. There was a recent study that did provide us with some information on just the impact in terms of jobs. So it is a large business and will offer jobs. So in that, to that extent, it does align with the comprehensive plan, but for the majority of the land use goals, it does not. The extent to which the proposed designation would impact public health, safety, and welfare, we do have some concerns. Depending on the size of the developments related to industrial, adequate buffers, noise, congestion, visual blight, all of those things have potential negative impacts on any surrounding area. In the context of our comprehensive plan and this designation, we have right now a rural designation that is being proposed to change to office industrial. And then on that same area, there is residential. So there's a natural conflict between those two. The extent to which there is additional land needs to be made available. A market study was not provided, but we all know that City of Fairburn is a major transportation hub. We have a significant amount of growth in industrial areas, and as it currently stands, we are meeting that inventory demand. We recently did have an economic development study, and so there were a number of industrial developments that were in that study. And then the last item, or the last three items, are related to how the project would, or how the proposed land use change would adversely affect the existing use or usability. Having an industrial near a residential would significantly and could potentially negatively impact the residential development nearby. Whether or not the proposed land use would result in excessive use related to streets, transportation facilities, public services, schools, or any other infrastructure. As it relates to streets or transportation, data centers do not typically have a heavy amount of transportation once it's actually built. Having an industrial use does not necessarily conflict with schools, because of those they don't typically have, like you would see with a multifamily development, a lot of children. So the focus, the analysis is really on how excessive the utilities are related to a data center. So in that way, yes, the proposed use without adequate upgrades and buffers could have excessive and burdensome uses. We have a number of other items that we look at as a part of a land use amendment, things like design, cultural awareness, economic development. There's always a positive impact when you have an industrial development in terms of job creation. Having developments close by tends to spur new development. Nevertheless, the industrial designation could have a negative environmental impact, could potentially expand industrial areas along Bohannon Road, could significantly impact water consumption, and yes, the potential development options would impact transportation in the area, even though it has less traffic than your traditional warehouse. The applicant did provide a number of items. There was the DRI study, so there was a significant amount of analysis that was provided to staff. Nevertheless, our concerns are related to our current infrastructure and natural resources. Staff has reviewed the application along with the existing zoning of the property, the adjacent residential uses, and the current use of the property, the development trends in the area, current infrastructure, and staff recommendation is if this designation is changed, there needs to be adequate analysis to consider the demand of water and other public infrastructure. If council makes the decision to change this land use, we would also recommend that there be a special area study or a master plan for this entire corridor, because it will significantly change that area. If there are no questions for staff, I know that was a lot of information at once, but, and I know our packets were pretty extensive. I think this might have been the largest packet we had just because of the amount of information that was provided in there. So I do just want to say thank you all I know you read through every single page, so I appreciate that. Are there any specific questions for staff related to the standards, our comprehensive plan, anything like that? And the applicant is also available to answer questions.
Yeah, got a couple questions. When we do a significant change like this from agricultural, right, so good old-fashioned ag land, to a light industrial, and in this case, it's earmarked, right, for a data center. What guarantees are there that if we make this change that it is a data center, right, and not another much more noisier light industrial, right? Like all of a sudden, because it borders up right to warehouses, lots of trucks, okay? This is not. This is a data center, it's just a building, probably less than 100 employees. You know, it's not a lot of coming and going, but are there any guarantees that it has to stay that? Or if we go and if this gets changed, does it open us up to, now we can change it, now we can bring in another 500 18-wheelers?
The modification to the land use designation changes it from industrial, which means that along with the proposed use that's being discussed, there are a variety of other industrial uses that would be aligned with the change. So if it's a data center, that's one thing, but that is an excellent question, and it would open us up to additional industrial uses. Because we can never guarantee that once something is approved that it will move forward with that. Things change, so there are no guarantees.
And maybe this, I don't know, is the applicant going to make a presentation? I mean, if there's other questions for staff, please ask them. That was my main thing when it related to. Can you give me some examples of other light industrial businesses, just for frame of reference, that could, say, be more negative than, say, a data center? I shouldn't use the word negative. That would present other issues, right? I mean,
I think
is a warehouse considered one?
yes, warehouse is
That's what my
considered
main concern.
light manufacturing is considered industrial. I think everything is about context. So you have to consider where the area is located. So if an industrial area is surrounded by industrial developments, there tends to be a complementary use. So if a warehouse is next to another warehouse and there is sufficient infrastructure related to transportation, it's not as burdensome. But if you are putting a heavy warehouse, anything with a lot of truck traffic, anything with a lot of noise that has an environmental impact, close to residential, that just by its very nature has a conflict. And as it relates to light industrial in the city of Fairburn, we've seen more sort of warehouse storage, things of that nature. Not necessarily your heavy manufacturing where you would have a lot of noise, but definitely a significant amount of traffic, a significant amount of noise, typically during work hours.
And this does appear to be like over to my left, as I'm looking at the screen up here, right? There's light industrial warehouses here. There's these 50 or so odd acres of currently zoned agricultural, nice road, and then residential. So currently, it kind of acts as a buffer, in theory, to the other light industrial. But by changing this, that buffer gets eliminated, essentially, if for future land use.
Yes, as
Okay.
it relates to future land use, yes. And we've seen designations that have, not necessarily in the city of Fairburn, but market changes and folks in other municipalities and other regions have changed from ag to other areas. And I've seen them where they've been incredibly beneficial, and I've seen cases where it has been incredibly detrimental to the surrounding community. So that's why you want to make sure that the infrastructure capacity, when you're looking at that change in designation, is really detailed in the analysis because of that potential impact. You can never plan for the what if. This is, changing. It's not just changing the color. It's changing the land use patterns within this area.
Okay.
Commissioners, do you have any more questions?
I
Staff?
just have another specific question. If this is approved, this would be the second data center in that area back on Bohannon Road, correct?
This, not necessarily, the other data center that's being proposed is on Galat, so it's a little bit
A
further
lot,
away.
right, it's down.
It is the second request, yes.
Right, okay. Thank you.
What is the buffer zone closer to the residents in that area?
Because it's, there's a road separating it, the properties to the north already have an industrial designation. Pretty much everything to the south is owned by the city, and for the most part, it's undeveloped. And then if you go further south, it's ag property. I think there's a farm. So there's farms, houses, city property, and then industrial to the north. But the properties that are adjacent to the north are industrial.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioners, are there any more?
No questions for
the
staff.
Staff, thank you. Commissioners, now is your time to ask questions of the applicant.
Let's see what he's got to say.
Good evening.
Evening.
I do have a presentation, so I'd like to run through that if we can. Perfect, thank you. Make sure this is working. Okay. Good evening. It's a pleasure to be here tonight. I have been before this board on numerous occasions. Most recently, funny enough, just was talked about earlier tonight, most recently for Oslo, which is on Highway 74, before that Dillon, before that Solstice. So have been developing in Fairburn for the better part of a decade now. So know this city very, very well, know its constituents very, very well. Do our best to try to respect everything about the city. So know that we come to you tonight having done a great deal of analysis and a great deal of given a great deal of thought to the project we're proposing. So before we get into anything, just know that that's where we're coming from to start. Before we dive into the project specifically, I thought it might be helpful to just take a minute and talk about what a data center really is, because there's a lot of information out there, there's a lot of questions about what they are, but we thought it might be most helpful to really kind of dive into what is it we're really talking about. So, first and foremost, what is it we're proposing, right? Well, we're proposing a facility that will more or less be a digital facility for the purposes of, cloud storage, computing, information the digital economy, more or less. So, when is it that you use a data center? Well, anytime you check your email, anytime you process a credit card payment, anytime you go to Netflix, anytime you use an electronic service, all of that lives somewhere, and that lives in a data center generally. What do they look like is a question that gets asked a lot. I think staff mentioned some of those things that we'll get into a little bit further in this presentation. Generally they look like a lot of different things. Frankly, they exist in a lot of communities, and people are wholly unaware that they even exist because generally they're just kind of sleepy. They don't do a lot other than, like I said, exist and process digital information. And then where are they located? We'll get into some of this too, but they're really located in a variety of different places. We're going to run through a number of examples, but all across this country, they are located adjacent to every use you can imagine. They are directly adjacent to residential. They are directly adjacent to commercial. They are directly adjacent to industrial. We'll run through some of those examples, and that runs the gamut as well of different kinds of homes. You have multi-million-dollar homes adjacent to data centers. You have normal, more average American homes located adjacent to data centers. So we'll get into that as well. Again, what do they look like? A variety of different things. These are a couple of interior photos, some exteriors. So again, they come in all shapes and sizes. They're much like other real estate asset classes in that there's no real one size fits all. They're all specific to their use, and generally we tailor these to be specific to the property on which they're located. So we've given a lot of thought to that as well. Some additional photos just to give you some context. So as I mentioned, these exist in a variety of different places. So to just run through a few, this is in our own city. So this is here in Atlanta. This is an urban location. So this is in the city of Atlanta. This is adjacent to a historic neighborhood. So directly adjacent, these are $700,000 plus homes. It is directly adjacent to recently developed commercial as well. So you can see it fits into the context of a mixed use environment. This is another one in Atlanta as well. So this is located adjacent to some existing industrial and railroad uses, as well as some $600,000+ homes. This is in Sterling, Virginia. So these are multi-million-dollar homes, and directly adjacent are not just one, but 3 different data centers. This is also in Sterling, Virginia. This is in Phoenix, Arizona. So we have countless examples of these, and we don't want to bore you with all those details, but the reason we're showing you these is because I think there's a misconception a lot of times that these are bad and that they do all these bad things, but I think when thoughtfully executed, like we're proposing to do, and when well thought out, generally speaking, they have a negligible impact on the community, and if anything, economically and from a transitional buffering standpoint, actually provide a very, very competent use in that regard. So what are the economic impacts of these? These questions get asked a lot as well. A single billion-dollar data center investment into a community can have the same impact economically as 1,700 jobs on a corporate campus. But they come without all of the other burdens to the infrastructure, i.e. all the traffic and the schools and the other different things that come along with that many employees and that many things happening in a community. One data center job generally supports 5 to 6 jobs elsewhere in the economy. So that means that for every one data center job created, there are 5 to 6 others created that support that or are a result of that. They bring new industries to communities. So in communities that don't have high-end computing capacity, there generally tend to be other jobs that show up. They also significantly increase local sales tax revenue. I mean, these are significant investments. But again, they are significant investments into the community and into these developments, but they don't ask a lot of the community. We'll get into some of the things that staff mentioned relative to the infrastructure and some of those types of things, but actually this particular project, we see those things as a benefit and a driver for why this project makes sense. Again, community impacts. Data centers are commonly situated adjacent to various uses. So these include single-family, multifamily, office, industrial, et cetera. I kind of mentioned that before. These have actually successfully been implemented as transitional buffers. So again, we're going to get into that a little bit more, but between the existing industrial and the residential that was mentioned, this actually serves as a very successful buffer. And again, when done thoughtfully as we're proposing, we think this actually is a benefit for the community. And again, we've run through some of these, so I won't bore you with all these details, but again, they create jobs, contribute to local organizations, and are significant contributors to the tax digest. So the project specifically, as was mentioned, is located along Bohannon Road. You can see the existing industrial facilities to the west and the north, and then you can see the existing planned development or residential to the east. You can also see the significant swath of transmission infrastructure that runs along the south side of the site. That transmission infrastructure exists today, and we'll show you a couple photos of that. That is one of the large drivers behind why we think that this makes as much sense as it does, because this project, unlike a lot of data center projects as staff mentioned, does not require a significant build-out of infrastructure in and around the city. It does not require us to go run transmission lines from a location to the site. It does not require us to go make incredible extensions to water and sewer infrastructure. It does not require us to go make significant improvements to transportation infrastructure or any of those things that would create a burden on the community that would be considered, detrimental. All of those facilities are in place. All of those facilities exist on the site. All those facilities exist in such a way that we aren't going to have to go burden the city of Fairburn by building those out in excess all around. Secondly, just to note, the existing character of the area around the site. As was mentioned, yes, there is some existing residential across Bohannon Road. However, there's also a plethora of industrial surrounding the site. There's a plethora of commercial in the corridor moving over toward Highway 74. And again, I want to make very clear that we have been as thoughtful as we possibly can be about trying to be considerate of how this project fits into the area, not just based on what the project is, but based on what's around the project. I mean, I personally have been in hearings where this property specifically has been brought before this board and city council requesting industrial zonings and requesting other uses that even we think are not the best use for this site. So when we looked at this, we truly did look at it and try to determine what is the highest and best use for this property. When, again, as I mentioned, we've got extensive experience in this community developing residential. When we looked at this property, we immediately concluded that this did not make sense as a residential development. For all the reasons that we heard other people say in prior zonings in this room, well, we don't want more industrial on this road because it creates traffic and it creates a burden to the neighbors, et cetera. That is exactly the reason why it doesn't make sense to develop this property as residential, for those exact same reasons, because if you don't want an industrial facility that has trucking and all that kind of stuff being built directly across the street from you, why would you buy a home that's developed with one literally in your backyard? So I think when we looked at that, we said, okay, that really does not make sense here. We then looked at retail or commercial. Well, it's on an ancillary street. There's no frontage. There's no access for that use. That doesn't really make sense. We looked at office. Office would generate significantly more traffic than our use will, and furthermore, in the climate we're in today, doesn't make a lot of sense as a use. So again, we really did look at all of those uses to try to determine not just can we make a data center work here, but what is the highest and best use for this property, and what is the thing that makes the most sense here. So moving into some of the specifics of the property, this is approaching the property along Bohannon from the north. So this is if you were coming down Bohannon Road toward the site. Again, some of the existing industrial that's on that would be the west side of the street. This is approaching the site from the south, so this is coming up Bohannon Road from Landrum. So you can see this is existing transmission infrastructure that I was referencing. This exists today. It's going to be there whether our project happens or not. And so our view is that rather than ask for this to be built out somewhere else, we're saying, well, let's go ahead and utilize what's already there. Let's make the best of what's already in existence today. As was mentioned, so this is the zoning map. You can see, I believe staff also mentioned that the city owns all of the property, or the majority of it, with the exception of the church. They own the majority of the property to the south of this site. That gives the city ultimate control and flexibility to ensure that whatever happens along the rest of the way down Bohannon Road is at the city's discretion based on the fact that they own all that property. We believe that this is actually the last sort of missing link in the surrounding zoning and use categories. And again, we believe that based on the use that we're proposing, really facilitates a successful transitional buffer and transitional density between the existing industrial and the residential. So let's move into the site plan specifically. So we're on the right side of the screen, you'll see the site plan is kind of oriented north-south. We're going to flip that just so we can kind of talk about it a little bit easier so it fits on the screen a little bit better. So just know that we're sort of rotating it to talk about it. So the north side of the plan will, the left side of the plan will be north. So as you can see, the site plan is as follows. There are 3 buildings on the site as shown. The transmission lines, as we just talked about, are to the right side of the page, so that would be kind of the south side of the page. So we have kept all of the buildings and facilities north of those transmission lines. Again, when we started this project, or when we started to analyze this project, because we know this community so well, we engaged very early with the neighborhoods, with the surrounding neighbors, with the community. Again, we've been in this room before. We've heard the conversation before. We engaged very early, sought input and feedback from the neighborhoods about what we were doing. So we didn't come to, actually we did all that before we even entered the development of regional impact process. So we did that having solicited input and feedback from the neighbors. So a lot of the things in our site plan are as a result of conversations with the neighborhood, are as a result of analysis with the neighborhood. So before we ever entered the process with the ARC to do our development of regional impact analysis, we had already addressed a lot of different things, and we had already made adjustments to our plan based on that. So a handful of things that I want to run through. The first is, the access point to this site. We have one single access point, which you can see on the north end of our plan. So it is, it's a little hard to see on the screen, I know, but sort of toward the top end of the page, or the left side of the page, on the north end of Bohannon. So we only have one access point along this road. We, in conversations with Meadow Glen specifically, located that access point north of the entrance to their neighborhood, which was by request. And we said, okay, we will help separate any access to our site from access to Meadow Glen. In addition, one of the things that we recognized through conversation with Meadow Glen was that turning in and out of their subdivision was a little bit of a challenge based on what traffic was coming up and down Bohannon Road. So what we have proposed as a part of our plan is some road improvements at that intersection that would create a turn lane for Meadow Glen to allow them to turn into the subdivision, both using a left-hand turn motion and then a right turn motion as well. So a similar improvement already exists just down the road at Cobblestone Glen, so we're basically proposing that we mirror that same road improvement here. Secondly, we have set the buildings back off the road by 100 feet. So there's 100 feet of buffer between the road and the first buildings. Additionally, we have designed the site such that it sits down in a hole. So we have actually, the proposed grading of this site has our finished floor elevation, or our walking surface, about 25 feet below Bohannon Road. So we're actually sitting it way back and way down from the road to remove it as far as possible. Again, coupled with one access point, we're gonna just kind of bury this in the trees behind Bohannon Road. Secondly, we have located all of our facilities and everything to the greatest extent possible, to the interior of the site, backing up to the existing industrial facilities. So what we believe is that will actually help serve as a buffer between the existing industrial uses and the residential. So right now, rather than, again, suggesting that this be some other use that directly backs up to industrial, we're suggesting that we put a very quiet use, and the way we actually like to talk about this is when you talk about a data center and what it is, we like to say that it's more like an office building without all the people. That's really how this operates. On any given day, we would be surprised if there was more than 20 people on site on any given day. So you can understand the levels that we're talking about in terms of the number of people actually on this site are de minimis relative to other uses. So we believe that, again, setting the site up the way that we have is actually a benefit. just want to make sure I'm covering all my points here. Are there questions before I move on from the site plan, before I go into the other stuff?
Yeah, whose data centers are these gonna be?
So
You building it out with the hopes of filling them, or do you already have one of the big hyperscalers on board for these?
So this is not a hyperscale size facility. So this is what would be called, cloud storage or data storage or something like that. So a hyperscale facility, number one, would need more area, more land mass. Number two, this would just not qualify due to certain requirements that other hyperscalers have that I'm probably not at liberty to talk about on a public forum. But no, this will not be a hyperscale facility. This will be used for the things I said. It's more like a co-location facility. So there would be a number of customers that would be located here. So you might have everyone from Delta Airlines to Netflix to Comcast. So there might be a number of different people that are occupying this. Another thing to sort of mention is, generally speaking, when these types of facilities show up in an area, the communications infrastructure, or not infrastructure, the communications capacities tend to improve drastically. Said another way, your internet usually gets a lot better when you're near one of these facilities. It reduces latency, it creates capacity for other services to be in the area, and generally speaking, it opens the door for additional services that may not have previously been in the area. So, for example, if AT&T did not have the capacity to have fiber infrastructure in an area because they didn't have anywhere to house all that backup infrastructure, then a new data center in an area might enable them to do that.
So essentially, hyperscaler is like probably the wrong word, but looking at more like a co-location. So essentially, you're building these 3 facilities, and then you will essentially lease out sections to entities, right? It could be a Delta, it could be a Comcast, it could be anybody that wants a semi-private or hybrid cloud, right? So you can, but it's not a single entity like a Meta, a Google, an Amazon, one of those, correct?
As I stand today, it is not.
Okay.
Could it be in the future? Possibly, but as we stand today, given the preliminary nature of where we are in the zoning and approval process, it is too early to say that. But generally speaking, the type of facility that this will be as compared to a hyperscale facility is not the same.
Because there's like 20 hyperscale facilities within 20 miles of here now.
That's correct. And
The largest in the world is in Fayetteville, so.
Right, and the hyperscale facilities tend to utilize significantly more resources than the co-location facilities do.
What, totally understand the parking thing. It doesn't take a lot of people to run these facilities at all, right? They intended to run autonomously. The big concern I have is power and water, right? Particularly with the city of Fairburn and our dependency on the city of Atlanta and aging infrastructure, and every 5 days we have little water pressure. Are there different things, just because of the massive amounts of water used for these, that the applicant is thinking to mitigate the risk? Maybe like a closed loop system or something like that? Otherwise, right, it just seems like it's a big strain on our already sort of aging water infrastructure. But I don't know if you could speak to that.
No, great question. So yes, there are a number of different things that we're already in the process of analyzing, one of which is air-cooled technology, which reduces the water consumption significantly. So air cooling requires a bit more energy from a power standpoint, but significantly less water. As I mentioned earlier, the hyperscale facilities are where you tend to see the real water usage, and that's the real significant water usage. The co-location facilities don't use a fraction of what those use. So the water sewer infrastructure requests that we have, I think are fairly nominal, all things considered, relative to a larger scale facility.
And then just looking at that map that's up there, right, the other thing is power. So because of its Providence location right next to transmission lines, there's no need to be running additional transmission lines and getting other things rezoned or eminent domain through property or other areas. I mean, is that where it's like you're just gonna, in theory, connect to those, build the substation that's required to supply the power, and then pop it over to the data centers? Is that correct?
That is correct, yeah. So where you see the substation on the right side of the page, we would more or less drop the lines off of the transmission lines down onto that substation and then go underground from there into our facilities.
And Georgia Power says we got enough power?
We are in talks actually with a number of different providers right now. And one thing that, I'm not sure whether this is the right form to bring this up or not. One of the things that we're in the process of analyzing right now is actually procuring our power in partnership with the city of Fairburn. So that would actually be an increased source of revenue for the city of Fairburn. So that's something that we've agreed to analyze and partner with the city in doing to try to help facilitate an additional benefit to the Fairburn economy.
I didn't get your name again.
Oh, did I not say my name? I'm so sorry. I'm sorry. My name is Will Cassidy.
Mr. Cassidy, and I generally ask this of a lot of the businesses that want to do business with the city of Fairburn. And this is my question for you. Why Fairburn?
Why Fairburn? Well, one, because I've been doing business in Fairburn for a decade. So I know Fairburn incredibly well. I have great relationships in Fairburn. We know the city well, and by that I mean we understand the city well. Again, we've been down here a long time. We understand how the city's growing. We understand the concerns of the community. And again, like I said, I think why Fairburn? I mean, number one, before we ever set out to start this project, I had existing relationships in Meadow Glen that I picked up the phone and called and said, hey, good to talk to you again. Remember, just 8 months ago, we were on the phone about the other project. Let's talk about another one, and let me get your thoughts on that. So I think why Fairburn initially, because we value the city and we value the relationships we have in this city, and I think we've been a big part of helping Fairburn grow in those positive directions. Secondly, Fairburn is growing, right? I mean, Fairburn is in the path of growth. It is where, most of the energy coming from Atlanta is expanding too. And so we believe that, Fairburn has not yet been the beneficiary of a data center, of a facility, of an investment of this scale and caliber. Again, we know the community well. We thought, why not? Let's bring one to Fairburn.
I know that you will be the second, not the first, right?
Second,
Data center?
in existence, or?
Oh, Fairburn. That will be Fairburn, because Gillette Road is still Fairburn. Am I correct? Mm-hmm. Bohannon Road is still Fairburn, so you will be the second, not the first.
Sorry for that.
Okay, all right.
Who builds it first, right? Then we can.
My question is,
Both still in
you mentioned about, you've been in feedback with Meadow Glen. Has it been the HOA leadership or the community residents?
Both, yeah. So we initially engaged with the HOA. We subsequently then opened up that dialogue to the entire community. So we held multiple public engagement meetings. We had a bunch of individual conversations with people that we met through other relationships, et cetera. So we've had conversations with all of the above. But we initially started with the HOA.
How many people would you say participated?
So when we actually held the open engagement meetings, I believe we had 3 to 4 people per meeting that attended.
3 to 4.
3 to 4, that's correct. But that wasn't for lack of trying. I mean, again, I think we did our best to be out in front of this. I mean, again, just for context, we have been working on this project for over a year. So this has all been in conversation, in process, in dialogue for over a year at this point.
Thank you.
Now, I will add to Commissioner Smith on that. When you say 3 to 4, compared to how many people live in Meadow Glen, that kind of concerns me. So
3 to 4 attended. That doesn't mean that's all the dialogue we've had. And we've had dialogue with tens of people. So that's that's just he asked who attended the meetings. And so we, as is required, and actually we went well beyond the requirements. We mailed out multiple notices to the surrounding community. And, I short of mailing everyone directly to their home and going and, asking to speak with so-and-so's friend, I don't know what we could do to track down everyone, if that makes sense. I mean, again, we've done our best to make it as public as possible. We've engaged the HOAs. The HOAs have notified their residents. Again, I feel like we have worked very hard to try to do that because we do care. We do want the input. We do want the feedback. I think it's just the results are what they are.
any other questions?
I have a question.
Yes.
If the notices were mailed out to the Meadow Glen homeowners on a Friday afternoon, and the meeting was the following, I think, Tuesday or Wednesday, how can you assume that people would have the time, especially working-class people, to have the time at the last minute to go to a meeting 3 days away, beyond the weekend?
Sure, if I'm not mistaken, I think we mailed them out a couple of weeks in advance.
No, they were mailed out that Friday before, and the envelope was dated that Friday afternoon in the PM.
That may have been one of the meetings for the future land use process where we were required to get that out because the city simply approved the process to amend the future land use plan. That process did not exist. We subsequently found out we had to have another meeting for that. So then we mailed out the notices as soon as we possibly could upon finding that out. So that was as a result of finding out when the city had actually created that process and the requirements for that process. So that was one of the subsequent meetings, but that wasn't the first one.
And at the first meeting, how many people attended the meeting?
At the first meeting, I don't have that in front of me, but I think, again, I would think it was probably 3 or 4 people that attended the first one.
Are there any additional questions, commissioners, for the applicant? Okay, if there are no additional questions or discussions, I will now call this item to a vote to provide a recommendation of approval or denial. Commissioners, make a motion in a second, please.
Can you pull up the recommendation just real quick, as you have it worded, Denise?
Sure. Staff has reviewed the application along with the existing zoning of the property, the adjacent properties, the current use of the property, the level of development occurring in the area, the current infrastructure, and natural resources. Staff recommends that if the designation change is approved, adequate analysis should be conducted to understand the demand for water and public infrastructure, along with additional special area study and master plan is my recommendation for that corridor.
So,
And the recommendation regarding the transportation piece is primarily reliant on our Public Works Director, who had some concerns regarding the road and the other, because data centers are significant size developments that could potentially use a significant amount of water. The City of Atlanta did provide a letter that was in the packet, and the letter stated a little bit further down that there is a water main owned by the City of Atlanta. A basis of design document will be required to be completed and a fire flow test performed at the site to determine if the system can support the water serve request. So my concerns are related to water consumption and infrastructure. So if council does decide to change that designation, I do think we need to do some additional analysis to figure out what upgrades are required.
So just, maybe this is for legal as well, by approving this, right, we're not necessarily blanketing approval, go ahead and start, getting the shovels out, right? It's approving this from the future land use development change, but with all of these conditions, right, around water, power, further analysis, transportation, things like that. I just want to make
The
sure.
first item is the land use
Right.
designation. We still have to consider the rezoning. You'll have to make a recommendation on that and a recommendation on the use permit.
Okay. Well, I'll put forth Commissioner Jones here to approve the future, I gotta get this right because there's a lot of words, the future land use development rezoning for the properties on Bohannon Drive for Fairburn Technology Center. Did I say that? Like,
Point of order, if I may, I
Oh.
thought the public comment
Oh.
section was
Sure.
going to be allow the public to speak after each new business
Oh,
action
sure.
item. That's how
Okay.
come there was no sign up for public comments.
This is not a public hearing, but if you would like to have the people in the audience speak, you can, but this is not a public hearing.
It was on the agenda, public comments, and usually we sign up, and then it was so that it was explained that if you want to talk, you can talk after each item.
It is up to the commission.
Because it is not a public hearing, we will not have public comment.
Understood.
Commissioners? Motion? I need a motion and a second.
I put the motion forward for an approval.
Is
The
it a
motion
motion
was
to?
with, can you repeat that for me? I'm sorry,
So
Jason.
put forth a motion to approve the future land use rezoning. I'm just going to make sure I get it all right.
The
Land use-
first item before you is the comprehensive plan land use amendment.
Right.
Right, sorry, the comprehensive plan land use amendment for an approval for the properties on Bohannon Drive.
Okay, need a second on?
Commissioner Smith seconded.
I now have a motion and a second, so I will call the vote. All those in favor of the motion as stated, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those in opposition signify by saying nay. The motion carries.
Okay,
Our second item,
the second item is a request to rezone the parcels from AG1 to M1 light industrial. The applicant has also submitted a request for a data center. So as it currently stands, the request does not align with comprehensive plan, council's discretion to change it. We do have a recommendation on the land use from the Planning and Zoning Commission. Some of the items are identical in terms of infrastructure analysis, all of that, so I won't go through everything, but my recommendation, staff cannot support the request because it does not align with the comprehensive plan, along with the concerns with the surrounding developments, including the residential properties. So staff recommends that if the request is approved, that the request should have a number of conditions related to it, including lighting that we've seen with similar other developments, just ensuring that that doesn't impact the residential piece. A vegetated buffer may be required once we have a actual landscape plan so that we can do the analysis, but there may be some additional items. We're also recommending that the developer be solely responsible for any infrastructure upgrades. We do not have confirmation from the City of Atlanta that they have the capacity for this. So staff is recommending that if mayor and council approve this request, that the developer will be solely responsible for all infrastructure upgrades, including water, sewer, and transportation. We're also asking that that screen right there is small. Hold on, give me a second. And my eyes are not what they used to be. There we go. Parking shall be paved. The applicant has to provide a letter of capacity and approval of the design from the utilities provider. The applicant will be required to combine all the parcels prior to the submittal of civil plans. The developer must provide a security plan. That was one of the concerns that we've had with high developments of industrial nature from our police department. So we want to make sure that there's a security plan that is approved by our public safety staff, and a fence is constructed around the entire facility. Staff recommends that all of the comments are addressed prior to the submittal of the civil plans. The property owner must prepare a sound mitigation plan with the final concept plan. The plan will be reviewed and approved by staff prior to the issuance of a certificate of occupancy. The sound mitigation plan must be implemented. One of the things that we've learned about data centers in general is that they tend to, depending on how they construct it, there can be a lot of noise associated with them. So we want a sound mitigation plan. And there were some comments in the noise study that was provided. And the applicant must submit an updated conceptual site plan and final building elevations. Again, staff cannot support the request, but if it is approved, we recommend that mayor and council consider the conditions that were just detailed.
I got a question for you.
Hold on a second. Thank you. I appreciate that. Now we'll entertain questions for staff regarding the request. Commissioner Smith.
My question is, you read up all these different conditions for mayor and council. What is our role here? What is staff recommendation to us?
Your role is to provide a recommendation to the mayor and city council. Staff also provides a recommendation. Even if the project, if staff doesn't support the request, we still usually recommend conditions associated. And as a planning and zoning commission, you can also provide a recommendation. Ultimately, it's mayor and council who makes the decision, but it requires planning and zoning commission to make a recommendation before city council can consider the item.
Are there any more questions, Commissioner, for staff? All right, thank you very much. Commissioners, now is your time to ask questions of the applicant. If there are any.
So I just want to recap what you said. So you're going to provide a 100-foot buffer, right? I'm assuming trees or whatever, right, on there, and it's going to be lowered essentially, right? So 25, you'll be entering 25 feet essentially below the main road, which would be where that residents are, which are 100 feet away. Is that correct?
That's great, yeah. So the residences themselves would be probably well over 200 feet away by the time it's all said and done with, by the time you have the 100-foot buffer plus the road, plus their setback and buffers, et cetera. And yes, you would enter our site and drop down into our site.
Okay.
If I may, we were not presented with these recommendations ahead of this meeting, so this is the first time we've actually seen these. But in hearing these quickly, I think many of these we have addressed and can address. I'm happy to answer questions about any of them specifically, but security, for example, we would definitely have security. I mean, we want our own security plan aside from whatever is required. From a capacity analysis, I think all of that is certainly satisfied through our design and engineering process, so we have no issues with any of those. Lighting, we have no desire to light the campus beyond what's required for security purposes. So there should not be any light pollution associated with this. From a noise standpoint, again, we have set this project down, back, and below the road. We also have sound walls planned for any outdoor equipment, such that those actually block any noise transmission. So again, set down, back, away from the road, sound transmission mitigated through sound walls and any other things that would need to be constructed between the buildings.
Commissioners, are there any other questions for the applicant?
No, he answered mine.
13 recommendations. You think you can meet all 13 recommendations?
Well, again, this is the first time I've seen them, so I would like to think, yes, we certainly do our best to try to meet all of them. But as staff just read them, we were trying to pay attention very closely. But yes, I believe that we can meet all these recommendations.
Thank you. If there are no additional questions or discussions, I will now call this item to a vote to provide a recommendation for approval or denial.
Commissioner Echols, I make a motion for denial.
Commissioner Smith, second that motion.
I now have a motion and a second, so I will call the vote. All those in favor of the motion as stated, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those in opposition signify by saying nay.
Nay. Does everybody have to vote?
I only heard 2 votes.
I only heard 2. Let's do that again, please.
Or we just need, there's a motion still pending, so we still need
Yes.
We need a second.
2.
We need
We have a second, but we don't have enough votes for the motion that was made. So we just need,
Nay.
okay, so we have 2,
Nay. 2 nay.
we have 3 nays
Need a
because you
motion to
seconded.
deny. Yeah.
So 3 nays, so the motion carries.
Motion carries.
Recommendation to deny. They made a recommendation. The motion was to deny
It was denied.
the rezoning request. And it was seconded. What was your vote?
One.
Nay, nay, nay.
No, her motion was, what was your motion?
Deny.
Deny.
What was the second?
To
Was
deny.
there a second?
I second.
And what was your vote?
Nay.
Against their motion or
Against her motion?
with her motion?
Against.
Against. So
Okay,
we're
and what's your motion? What's your vote?
Against.
Okay, so we have a
2.
tie.
Mr. Chairman?
So the chairman has to vote.
To deny.
There you go.
Our third item of new business is as follows. Evergreen Final Plat. Applicant, DRB Group Georgia LLC. Property owner, DRB Group Georgia LLC. Property location, 294 Elder, 09F 1710006 70178. 29 Elder Street, 09F 1710006 70244. Summary, the applicant requests approval of the final plat. Staff, I will now ask you to present the staff analysis and recommendation.
Better? Okay, there we go. Now we're cooking. Okay, so Evergreen. This was a development that was approved a while ago. The applicant has satisfied the zoning conditions that could be alleviated at the moment. There will need to be some additional amenities areas like the gazebo and other items, but before those items can be installed, the final plat has to be approved so that the building official can look at the accessory structures. The developer is currently working with community members to do some additional items that they wanted to address. These are not zoning conditions. As it currently stands, staff is recommending approval of the final plat because the developer has met all of the conditions that they can at this point. The developer and builder is DRB. They're available to answer any questions regarding the final plat.
Thank you. I will now entertain questions for staff regarding the request. Commissioners, now is your time.
No questions from me.
No questions? Okay, Commissioners, now is your time to ask questions of the applicant. Thank you.
Evening, Madam Chairman and Commissioners. My name is Pat Pierce. I'm the land development manager for DRB Homes. What you have before you, like Ms. Denise said, is for Evergreen. It's 73 single-family detached homes on Elder Street. Currently, we've completed all the required improvements, and like Ms. Denise also said, we have a few things left that can't be completed until the final plat's approved. So I'm here to answer any questions you might have.
Commissioners, do you have any questions for the applicant?
No.
How many homes is it again? Apologize, I did,
73.
73, okay, just want to make sure. Thank you.
There are no questions.
That was easy.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, if there are no additional questions or discussions, I will now call this item to a vote to recommend approval or denial.
Commissioner Jones put forward the motion to approve the Evergreen final plat, applicant DRB Group Georgia LLC.
Commissioner Echols, second.
I now have a motion and a second, so I will call the vote. All those in favor of a motion as stated, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those in opposition, please signify by saying nay. The motion carries. Our fourth item of new business is as follows. Renaissance Parkway, final plat, dedication. Applicant Douglas A. Schumett. Property owner, OCP Fairburn LLC. Property location, Renaissance Parkway, consisting of approximately 2.741 acres. Summary, the applicant is requesting approval to dedicate without limitations all those described roads, utility easements, water easements, sewer easements, gas easements, storm, water easements, and related infrastructures. Staff, I will now ask you to present the analysis and recommendations.
Hello again. The item before you is at the request of our Public Works Department. Renaissance Parkway, this is not the full Renaissance Parkway, but this is up until the easement is being dedicated to the city. Our Public Works Department, our engineers have reviewed it, recommend approval. So staff is also recommending approval of the request to dedicate the infrastructure to the city.
Thank you. I will now entertain questions for staff regarding the request. No questions? Thank you. Commissioners, now is your time to ask questions of the applicant. Applicant here.
I don't believe the applicant was able to make the meeting.
Okay. Keep going. Okay, if there are no additional questions or discussions, I will now call this item to a vote to recommend approval or denial of the plat. Commissioners?
Commissioner Jones, recommend approval of the Renaissance Parkway final plat dedication as stated.
Second.
Commissioner Echols, second.
I now have a motion and a second, so I will call the vote. All those in favor of the motion as stated, please signify by saying aye.
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 All those in opposition signify by saying nay. The motion carries. Our fifth item of new business is as follows. The concept plan for Meadow Glen Village. The applicant, Portman Residential LLC. The request approval of the concept plan for the mixed-use development. The location is Highway 74, Senoia Road, and Meadow Glen Parkway. Parcel number 09F020100121014, and parcel number 09F070000271062. Summary. The applicant requests approval of the conceptual plan. Staff, I will now ask you to present the staff's analysis and the recommendations.
Yes, this item came before you a few months ago. The applicant is just seeking approval of the concept plan. This is the same item that was presented prior to, but because one of the rezoning conditions requires that the applicant present that item to you guys again, so that you can make sure all of those items, or as many of them as we can, in the conditions are met. The next step in the process, if the Planning and Zoning Commission recommends approval, is the submittal of civil plans. That's a lot of engineering, infrastructure installation, all of that stuff. We're reviewing all of that prior to once the civil plans are done, then the applicant would get the land disturbance permit and you would see things moving, but that's quite a few months away. But the item before you does meet the conditions that were a part of the original ordinance. And the applicant is available to answer any questions, concerns regarding the concept plan.
Thank you. Commissioners, are there any questions for staff?
They've met all the, I mean, I remember this, they've met all the things and that we've come back to as well, just.
Yes,
verbally
up until,
confirm.
yes.
Okay.
There are some items, so for instance, there's that condition regarding the limitations on the amount of units.
Yeah.
So they can't meet that without actually having the concept plan, getting approved by this body, and then the civil plans and, yeah.
Just kind of need this to take the next step and then the next step. Okay.
Mhm.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. So Commissioners, are there any questions for the applicant? No. Okay. If there are no additional questions or discussions, I will now call the vote. The item to a vote to approve or deny the conceptual plat. Commissioners, please make a motion in a second.
Commissioner Jones, make a motion to approve the concept plat for Meadow Glen Village, applicant Portman Residential LLC, as stated.
Concept plan?
Concept plan, sorry. Not plat, plan.
Commissioner Smith, second.
Okay, I now have a motion in a second, so I will call the vote. All those in favor of the motion as stated, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposition signify by saying nay. The motion carries. Thank you. Commissioners, I will now entertain a motion to adjourn the public meeting.
Point of order, the next item on the agenda is other business, and if I may, if this is not a public meeting, fine is item F, public comments.
We did have public comments.
At the beginning of the meeting, there was a opportunity for public comments unrelated to any of the agenda items. If there are members of the public who are here and have concerns about any of the developments, they can certainly submit those to staff. And during the public hearing, mayor and council will take comments for all of the items that are subject to a public hearing.
If that was true, why was there not a sign-up list to sign in for public comment? I asked about that, and it was explained you could comment after each agenda item.
This is a public meeting. The items that are under new business have not been advertised as public hearings under the zoning procedures law. Those hearings are before mayor and city council. So for purposes of public comment, like I said, if the commission wants to have people speak, they can. This is a public meeting.
We will move
It's
forward.
not closed to the public. This is an open meeting, but these are not public hearings. Those hearings are before mayor and city council.
So we stand corrected that on public comment, that is the time to speak freely on whatever it is.
Yes.
You can speak about. Is that true?
Yes, and you can,
Okay, I'm
if you,
clear now.
excuse,
I'm clear.
sir,
Sir, please.
if you would like for him to come up or whomever to come up and speak, you can.
Oh, no, no,
But
I'm ready for
this is
a
again,
let's go home.
again, this is for purposes of a public hearing.
Absolutely.
Issues are heard before mayor and city.
If I may, just one more time, I'm very confused because, you know, we were told if you want to speak, you sign up, then we were told, no, we're not signing up, you can speak.
I think it's really important for the purposes,
And then
Mr. Brooks, we can't
were
speak at the
told
same
it was
time.
not a public meeting, and now we're being told it is a public meeting. I'm just very confused. It seems to be a little homebrew, and so,
Right.
let's go home, y'all.
Okay.
All right, commissioners, I will now entertain a motion to adjourn the public meeting.
Commissioner Smith make a motion to adjourn the public meeting.
I now have a motion and a second, so I will call the vote. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Oppositions? Nay. Motion stands. Good night.